And welcome into Dawgs Central Live on a Tuesday night. I am Graham Coffey. That is John Smith. We're here to talk a little Georgia-LSU, break down some highlights, and catch up with the rest of the latest goings-ons in the college football / UGA universe. John, how are we doing this evening?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. It's good to be king, Graham. Georgia, #1 in the college football playoff, 13-0. Got a former walk-on as a Heisman finalist. Got players being finalists for awards. Got coaches being finalists for awards. These are the good old days. So I'm always happy to come on here and talk about Georgia football right now.
Yeah, it's a fun time to be a Bulldog for sure. And, really kind of interesting to look at this team and how it's evolved and think about, Georgia looking very comfortable playing a 16-6 football game in Lexington. And then, looking very comfortable again in a 50-30 victory in Atlanta. You went from 22 total points to 80 total points in two weeks of gameplay. So I think that's a good sign for Georgia. Just like some of the Georgia teams in the past seem to kind of have a recipe, right? Where, if a game started moving more towards that high scoring bar, they didn't always look quite as comfortable, and they were a little more reliant on the defense. And 2022 Georgia, really is totally fine when they need to be explosive and efficient on offense, and just kind of seems like they can kind of gear up and down as they please. And, you always kind of caution a team to not assume that the switch is just there at any time. But so far, so good. 13-0 for the first time in school history. Any kind of broad range thoughts you want to throw out before we turn on this highlights of this SEC championship?
Yeah, I mean, just building on what you said, I remember this time last year, the feeling that we had after the SEC championship game. And I also remember the questions that everyone had about, it was about the Georgia offense. It was a lot about Stetson Bennett, but it was, hey, if Georgia has to come out and throw the ball 30 times in a game and score 40 points, can they actually win the game? That was the question after the Alabama Georgia SEC championship last year. Since then, Georgia has done nothing but the Michigan game, and then the fourth quarter of the Alabama national championship, and then coming into the season with a full off season with Todd Monken and Stetson Bennett and working with his wide receivers and tight ends. Georgia, like you said, it's good to be in a position where, you can win a slugfest, because Georgia has notoriously been able to do that. But hey, if you got to go out and score 40, you like your chances there too. And so it's a really good spot to be, especially going into playing an Ohio State team that can put points on the board. But we'll talk about them after we talk about LSU.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing that I want to kind of point out, just for viewers to watch as we go through this tape, is look how good this Georgia offensive line has become. And it was 2 months ago when they went to Missouri, and it looked like a disaster up on that front five, and they could not protect Stetson Bennett. They couldn't run block to save their lives for 3 quarters of that game. Like, it was pretty grim. And
there were people questioning, people who will remain nameless in the text thread were questioning if Stacey Searles was the right hire. Do we have the right dudes on the offensive line? Man, it was not good. That Missouri game did not put us in a good state of mind. But you fast forward, and I mean, watching some of these highlights from guys like Devin Willock, watching, these guys get out in space as big mountains of men on the offensive line and moving people. It's a beautiful thing right now.
For sure. Well, and I mean, like guard play has been something we've talked about on the show for years now. And that all of a sudden is fine. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to look back on. So
it's good stuff.
All right, here, yeah, you got this tape going.
Yeah.
So obviously, LSU came out and moved the ball on Georgia to start with. You know, I was pretty impressed by their first drive. It felt like a solid decision by them to take the ball and go for it. You know, you got this 3rd and 3 here early in the game, and I mean, let's just go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room, right? I mean, like they started going after Ringo early and often. You know, and that's okay. But you know, I mean, like giving up a slant is fine. Some of the things that happened later on were not so fine.
Yeah. Well, what you're doing, you know, you can tell. We talked about this in the preview, right? Where I thought this was going to be LSU's best chance to come out, throw some short passes, short to intermediate, make Georgia kind of force their hand to come up and play a little bit of tighter coverage, and then try to hit some of the things over the top. But Georgia did a good job on the first drive. Gave up a first down, but stopped them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know, this first 3rd and 4 was really awkward.
Yeah.
You had Kyrus kind of break open late on the comeback route, but
and I didn't love
real locked in on McIntosh for some reason.
Yeah, I didn't love the whole first kind of series. I felt, I don't know what Georgia, you know, I know you're trying to force the issue with running the ball a little bit, but the run pass kind of monster got us a little bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was kind of my complaint about the Georgia Tech game, and I had predicted all week Georgia would come out and open up the playbook, and then they came out and went run pass again, and I was like, oh, well, let's see, you know, will the real like Georgia offense please stand up? Shout out to Nyland Green, excellent special teams play here.
Yeah, and that's a guy who, you know, is continuing to fight for reps on the defense, could start on some other teams, is coming out and making plays.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like this right here, like that's just like, let's be honest, good offense beats good defense, right? Like Malik Neighbors is a big dude. You know, him and Ringo had some good battles on that sideline. Like that's a well-thrown comeback route. I don't have a problem with that, is, you know, what I'm trying to say, really. You know, like that 2nd and 3 right there, that might have been, you know, I think LSU maybe had 2 like successful run plays in this game almost. I mean, like Georgia's, you know, they did a lot of what they did to Tennessee, right? Where it was like, you're going to have to throw it 50 times, and we're, you know, we're going to focus on making that difficult for you and trying to take away short routes. Like this is just good execution, really, right? The 2nd and 7.
Yeah. I mean, you got, you know, what they were doing is they were getting some of their good wide receivers matched up on linebackers in kind of this, you know, cover 2 man underneath scenarios. And when that happens, right? I mean, JDJ, it's like that's a tough play to come out there and make. And because I mean, like, just for those of you at home, you know, just remember in that scenario, like he is responsible for the run gap as well, you know, and we don't know at the snap that LSU is throwing the ball, so he can't just shade all the way over to that, you know, to line up in front of that receiver. Right.
But yeah, I mean, like you know, this was the one and only catch that Lassiter gave up in the entire game right here. 2nd and 7, him and Starks switch in coverage, and he comes close to closing in on that. But like that's Jaden Daniels threw a dart, you know? And I think with Georgia all year, what we've talked about on this show is like, they don't mind giving up those yards downfield because they trust that when they get you inside the 20, they're going to suffocate you. And right here, like this is basically a triple option type of play, right? Like Daniels has a choice to hand that off or keep it, and then he's got the outlet there. But it's like boom,
Yeah.
Georgia did what Georgia does, where they all of a sudden got LSU behind the chains.
Yeah. That is actually the Hugh Freeze 3-man surface offense right there.
It is. Wow.
This is your future Auburn versus Georgia right here.
Good luck with
get ready.
I don't see a Laquan Treadwell.
No, it's still.
Yeah, and then here, Georgia, in the red zone, all of a sudden Georgia starts some different substitution packages, bringing some different, so you get a little stunt up front right here with Jalen Carter and Walther switching. As hard as I've been on Chaz Chambliss this year, he played a really good football game on Saturday.
He did.
In there, and that's kind of just a team rush play there, It counts as a sack because he doesn't get back to the line of scrimmage. But now you have them in 3rd and 9, which is where Georgia seems comfortable. And then you have this play. And this is one of those plays that's interesting, right? Because I think if we can go back to that, if you can pause when they're lined up pre-snap. The person at home sees this and thinks Ringo gave this catch up. And what's really happening here is you're going to see at the snap, Keeley has his chest, you see his right foot back. He's playing inside technique. He is trying to keep that receiver inside. And Javon Bullard is supposed to be his help there. And Butte is in the slot, and Bullard is responsible for him right off the line. But you see, Starks and Bullard switch him in the middle of the play. And Bullard is supposed to be there to help and guard.
He knows it.
Brian Thomas. Yeah, he knows it. Exactly. He's clapping his hands there. And so, I thought LSU had a really good game plan of occupying Georgia's inside, the star like Bullard and their safeties. LSU occupied those guys with a lot of seam routes and deep routes down the field. And Georgia, especially on that side with Ringo, kind of struggled with switching some of those as timely as they should, and that created some windows for LSU to throw into.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot. When we get to the second half, you'll see a lot more of that for different reasons. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, a lot of it was communication. And when you're playing this type of, when you're putting athletes out there and asking them to make plays and switch off of people, you're going to have those scenarios happen a pretty good bit. But that's also, I think the bend don't break part of the defense as well.
For sure.
Yeah. Thought the goal line was really strong here on this 3rd and goal. Man.
Look at Chambliss.
That was just Chaz is being a bully, man. That's what we needed from Chaz. He just comes up and just bull rushes the guy.
And he should be the tight end in that situation, right? And if you're Georgia, you got to be happy. I thought this was the most productive game the edge rushers have had since Nolan got hurt. 4 pressures from Chambliss, 4 from Bobby Beal. That's, solid. And Chaz had 2 sacks, so it was a good day.
All right. Here's the block field goal.
Yeah, the high football IQ play of the year by Chris Smith.
Yeah. This was while we're watching this, Chris was a finalist for the Nagurski Award, and I have it on my Twitter account if you haven't seen it. He gave the story of this, and he said, they have the rule of you can't pick it up unless you score. And he said he was looking over at the sideline to try to see if he should pick it up, and he looked at the referee, and the referee gave him like the go ahead, and so he picked it up. It's a pretty good story.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, LSU didn't know what was going on here, but you look at Georgia's defense, half these dudes are almost to the side.
They didn't know what was going on. There's Robert Beal and Jalen Carter high-fiving each other while Chris runs right past them. So,
and the timeliness, because he literally, as soon as that ball actually settles, it is dead. Yep. And right before it does, but, just a great play by him. And
Great play.
It's hard to beat Georgia as it is, but if Georgia's getting a play like that against you, man,
yeah,
it's going to be a long night.
And let's also talk about how many field goals Georgia has blocked in these big games, right? Blocked one in the national championship, blocked, this one. I mean, it's a continual
blocked one. Didn't they block one against Michigan last year as well? I believe maybe.
I feel like they did. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they had 2 blocked field goals against Kentucky in a pretty competitive close game in 2021. Yeah, and we haven't seen him do it all year, but
right.
Jalen Carter's good at creating space in there.
Yeah. All right, here's some more.
Yeah, this was a frustrating play. Yeah, Mondon is in zone there, and he's expecting someone else to be there to pick up booty from him, and they're not because, again, LSU has occupied those middle of the field linebackers and safeties with deep routes, and Smith is responsible for that help over top with Ringo, and Starks is occupied by 86, the tight end. So it is I think for me, if I'm Georgia's coaching staff, like what I'm saying to these guys when I'm watching this film is, like, you guys have to talk on the field. You have to communicate, and no, there's not time to have conversations in the middle of the play, but, like, normally when you're switching a guy, you're yelling switch at each other. And, if that's not happening, then maybe that's a cue to not assume that you are switching this guy.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
This was
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was a good concept by LSU too, because you're bringing these levels, right? And, like, you're getting exactly what you wanted. So if in the middle of your screen where you have Smile Mondon, if he comes over the face of that receiver a little bit more, then that throw is not there. But when he doesn't, when he lingers and drags a little bit behind, that's exactly what you wanted from LSU. Probably didn't want both those receivers right there, but it worked. Yeah.
And to your point, if he's playing more across the face of number 7, then number 6 is pretty open, likely on that play as well. I mean, Starks is going to have to make a very tough play to break that up. So they did a good job of putting guys in conflict. And it did feel like this was a big drive in this game because Georgia's defense had been on the field all the first quarter. I know it was tied, but Georgia went 3 and out for a series. They hadn't really proven themselves in this game yet, and I thought it was very telling that when Georgia needed a drive early in this game, they came out and they go pass, 3 straight plays, 1 to Ladd, 2 in a row to Brock. I love this play to Brock right here with him lined up. You get to see him, and then this next play he's lined up out on the boundary, and that's not something they do too much with him, but I think they could pretty much whenever they want. And I mean, speaking of good concepts, like this is, Georgia hitting them with a deep kind of slant and a go route and splitting the, putting that safety in conflict basically.
How are you feeling about yourself too when you have Darnell and Brock down there? Brock fighting for yards and Darnell coming to block you. You got it. Yeah. I'm making business decisions, bro. Yeah. Which is exactly what happened right here and resulted in a 15-yard penalty because you can't block the blocker. No.
You can't tackle the blocker, which is what the kid did, trying to avoid getting crunched by Darnell.
Yeah, this is the replay of the previous play. Yeah, he comes up right here. You'll see him, and he's like, nope, I'm going to take your legs out.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah, that was a scary play, just in terms of Washington's health and all that. And then, 3rd and goal, right? Like, this was the bugaboo the last few weeks for Georgia. And I don't know about you, but I was a little upset when 1st and 2nd down play calls were kind of, vanilla-ish runs that didn't work.
Same.
And this is an interesting concept from Georgia because you have the offensive line like down blocking, like all these guys are moving towards that right hash, and that's not something you normally see on a pass play. So it's confusing if you're a linebacker because you're going to maybe see that and read run.
Yep. That's exactly what you're going to read, and that's why you do that. You push everything to that side, and then all you're trying to do, right, with this concept is just get that leverage for Brock Bowers. So you're pushing everybody that way and just trying to get him that little bit of leverage by doing so, and worked out super well. You also run a little bit of a pick down there too, so it's good.
Yeah, it's modern college football for you.
It is. Hey.
It's nice to see Georgia doing some of that because those were like the kind of like freebie things that felt like they didn't do for a long time. This was great. This is like a clinic in setting an edge for Michael Williams right here.
Yeah. It's sorry, the rewind is going back like one extra play for some reason, but
it's okay.
I wanted to show that again because Michael, I mean, this is a true freshman too.
Yeah, and he just shucks that guard and good night.
Perfect.
Good defense by Bullard there. Or Smith, I'm sorry.
Chris Smith. Yeah, Chris Smith. Yeah, and then you get the helmet INT. I thought this was, you have those moments in a game where I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious where, it's like, all right, all right, these are it's going to go your way. And you see this kind of play and you're like, all right, this is going to be our night.
Well, and those are the type of plays that always seem to happen to Georgia for decades.
Correct.
Right. And I think, Kirby made an interesting point in the press conference. Like that's the exact same route that Chris Smith jumped against Clemson. And, you think about that play is very similar to the famous Malcolm Butler Super Bowl interception against the Seattle Seahawks that, won that game. But like Chris Smith, how many times in his career at Georgia over 6 years in Athens, or maybe 5, but however long he's been there, like how many times has that route happened in practice and somebody has gotten in his face and said, it is your job to beat that guy to that spot. And that's exactly what he does, and he puts his body in there as well. A lot of DBs aren't playing that as physically as he does in that situation.
Yeah. And then I always love, right, Georgia capitalizes right on the turnover. Go for the kill shot.
The jugular, And this is, Todd Monken mentioned today, you tweeted about it, but like this was a Mike Bobo catch, this was a play that he saw a tendency in LSU's defense, and Ladd comes in motion. We're going to talk in a minute about what Georgia did with Ladd's motion, but Stetson does a really good job here of kind of manipulating number 3 there with his eyes, keeping him a little more shallow.
And I mean, let's also talk about this too. I mean, you've got 4 guys in the area for LSU. I mean, that throw, like that's not an easy throw. Like you got 4 dudes that you're trying to fit it in. And LSU probably thinks they have it covered decently well when you're in that kind of zone box around them. Just a good throw.
Absolutely.
All right. It's 3rd and 1.
Yeah, Georgia was great in these short yardage run situations all day. And I mean, like, look at that surge from Walter. And Lassiter's in there as well. I mean, like, that's just a great play. And then I loved this. 3rd and 5. Georgia spread them out. And then, Milton runs it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I love this. I love this run right here I just love this series by Kendall Milton. Sorry, that wasn't it. It's coming up.
You're good.
But this series by Kendall Milton as a whole was just really strong. It's kind of, I love this play call right here too. You got
this is a really nice 7 route to Rosemy here, and just if anything, Stetson's a hair late throwing it, but just
this is the run I was talking about by Kendall Milton. Like this is what we've been wanting to see from Kendall all year, right? You squeeze inside and then you find that vision to the outside, and it feels like the last few weeks he's starting to get a feel for that play right there.
Yeah, totally. We had a conversation on the show earlier this year where, he was kind of talking about how he was following his guys' helmets and sometimes not reading his blocks well. And, I mean, speaking of blocks, like you got Dylan Bell down there giving number 3 hell, 30 yards, 20 yards downfield. Bowers takes a guy off his feet. This is a great shot here. Darnell seals the end of the line of scrimmage. And then
Rosemy Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, this is and this is the stuff, honestly, that Georgia does that a lot of teams don't do. And as much talk as there is about the receiving corps at other big programs, and it's very warranted because these guys are really talented, like what makes Georgia a dominant force in modern college football is that these tight ends and receivers who are studs and who have very lucrative futures ahead of them in many cases do the dirty work, man. And they know they're not getting on the field if they don't.
Yeah, I mean, tell me a wide receiver 1 in college football that's going to be making that block, getting inside there in between Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, like Rosemy Jackson, just mucking it up, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's just physical football.
Yeah. And then, this was a play. It was like one of those almost kind of plays. Not the greatest moment from Amarius Mims, but he had a phenomenal game coming in for McClendon. You see him there pick up that blitz and kind of force that guy out. Nothing's open downfield, so it turns into this field goal attempt that's missed.
Doink.
Yeah, dude, that would look like one of my bad tee shots, man. Like cuts left, curves back right, curves back left.
Yeah, that's the patented. Listen, if you come play golf with me, this is my patented slice right here. Goes in, and then I think it's gonna go straight, and then nope.
The duck,
but
the
also
duck slice.
But Jackpot Leslie, I mean, it's hard to hit the upright from 43 yards out. So kudos to him for.
He should win something for that. This was an interesting play. LSU sideline, I think, wanted interference. I thought. And let's be honest, this is the difference between Lassiter and Ringo sometimes in these situations where they're going to beat is if you turn around and play the ball, you get the benefit of the doubt. And the truth of the matter is that, when the ball gets there, the defender has just as much a right to it as the wide receiver does. And so, if the receiver wants to stop and you run through them with your head facing them, you're going to get called for it. But if you turn around and flip your hips and put your hand up and, try to swat the ball, like that contact is pretty hard to call in that situation. And I think that's something Lassiter has been really good at this year that maybe Keeley is not as much at times.
Yeah.
That's tough throw right there. Almost kind of throw. I mean, and him and Rosemy have connected on a lot of plays like that this year, but Stetson gets the 15-yard penalty for the face mask swipe, and Georgia stays out of a 3rd and 11. But, then you're in 3rd and 8. This was a really impressive play by Stetson because I think they'll show the replay here. No, I guess they didn't. But if we watch this watch his back foot slide. Yeah. Like he loses his footing, and he's got guys coming in his face. Like LSU's getting a good amount of pressure, and the pocket's breaking down. And the way he sidearms this in between defenders, and it's a backyard type of play that and then that throw too, man. Like that's some serious shit, dude. I'm sorry. Like
it is.
There's not many guys in college football making that throw.
Yeah, and I mean, people, people will give him a little bit of grief for like gunslingerish, but if you're making the throw, I mean, you're going to your right, throwing across your body, making that throw.
It's like some old Brett Favre, dude.
Yeah, it is.
Except
Yeah, it is.
It normally gets picked off for
Brett,
and that's not a throw that I can promise you when they're reviewing this game, that's gonna be like a Stetson type.
Don't do that
conversation. Do not ever do that again.
Yeah,
but I think it is impressive to see how he has kind of learned to use different slots and arm angles when he throws the ball, because it's made his game better, and he's just gotten better. And then this play, I loved the motion here pre-snap, and I love Stetson snapping it quick enough to not let LSU adjust here. You're going to see Ladd come across the formation, and this left safety for LSU. Yeah, as soon as he's he's dead. They're dead because
toast.
You got Darnell.
Yep. Very nice. Yeah, I thought the whole, after that first, maybe couple of series, I thought Georgia was playing as good as I've seen them play all year on offense.
Yeah, I would say since Oregon probably or South Carolina. And then, this, oh my God, this was legendary. I mean, this was, dude. I've never seen somebody do that on a football field that I can.
How do you have the wherewithal to not only pick him up, but in that moment to hold
the finger up,
the number one? I mean, that is.
It's a professional play, man. It is. It's okay, I'm not going to body slam him and ragdoll him to the ground. Let's keep it moving. You know what I mean? All right, blow the whistle. I'm not going to hurt him. Let's move on. Yeah. It was hilarious.
And that's where you saw, in that moment, I think that's where you saw Brian Kelly knowing he was going to have to make a move away from Jaden Daniels. Just Georgia was just too much for him, especially.
And this is
Hobble.
I love this drive right here. I liked this moment because Dylan Bell dropped a screen pass the drive before, I think, or it was maybe 2 drives before, but you put Kyrus out there, who's done this 1,000 times, right? And you kind of forget how good he is with the ball in his hands.
I wanted to pause it here because this is my favorite clip, maybe in the whole highlights. Look at Broderick Jones.
Yeah.
And he got this DB, just fearing for his life. It's just amazing.
Well, I did think it was a little ironic seeing Major Burns here, kind of drive him into the ground out of bounds and stand over him. You're getting beat by 21, man. Dejan has looked a lot better the last couple of weeks, man. I thought he came on really strong earlier in the year, and a lot of what he brings, I think, is low pad level patience, quick cut, change direction, and reading his blocks. And I think he got a little too eager for a couple of weeks, kind of late October, early November, and then Georgia Tech, this game, he's done a really good job of finding those little creases in the line again.
Yeah, here's a Ladd injury, but man, I love this play call too. Brock Bowers, I mean, we talk about his blocking all the time, but God, there's no way you can beat that when you got a guy that can block that well out there and also catch the ball. Hated to see this for Ladd, but it was good that there's no structural damage and should be fine.
Yeah, and that knee, I think, was already bothering him a little bit, but I mean, that's just a hard hit onto your kneecap with 3 dudes coming down on top of you. And then
hated this play call.
Yep. Dude.
Another vanilla first and goal. You're just gonna run between the tackles. Yeah,
and then liked this.
I mean, I don't question Todd Monken often, but I don't understand. I mean, it feels like these are the kind of things you can do on first and goal versus getting in these situations where it's just because that is easy money right there.
Yeah, and what was interesting was, I guess, like, I don't know. I mean, that was like I did think he managed like Georgia, instead of trying to take the clock down to 0 like they did at the end of the half against Tennessee and in some other situations this year. Like they just, like they just scored the touchdown and said it's fine. We'll give LSU 30 seconds, and it did lead to a field goal. I think one thing I did want to point out that I talked about in 12 takeaways is so before this drive, once Georgia went up 35-7. At this moment in the game, LSU had 164 total yards. And, Georgia end of half, Georgia slouched back, started playing a lot softer on defense, we thought, I think, which is normal for an end of half situation. But they did sort of soften up as well in the third quarter. There were problems that we're about to look at with the secondary in the second half. But I do want to be clear that the scheme changed a little bit. And when you're up 28 points, there is an element of like, we really have to do some stupid stuff to mess this up. And some of that stupidity is playing too tight to the line of scrimmage against a group of really good wide receivers and getting beat deep for 75-yard touchdowns.
Yeah. And you're already in a situation where you're up 28. They've already burned you on one of those, a missed tackle was involved, but it's a championship game, right? I mean, Kirby's smart. You would be crazy not to make some of the adjustments. And what we'll see in the second half, though, that I didn't love is I did feel like some of the effort changed a little bit. I
agree.
Even though the scheme changed, but there's a difference between playing a little softer. Kenny McIntosh.
That was a weird play, man.
Yeah.
And I mean, the way that Georgia was moving the football in this game, you look at that missed field goal and you look at this drive with the turnover. And I love this concept, by the way. So I was going to say Georgia could have scored 60 if you get those 10 points back. But, yeah, that concept kind of goes back to the long George Pickens throw in the national championship game last year, with the double end around, basically, like the end around reverse fake. They do that with some different variations to it quite frequently.
Yeah. And Kirby, he said in the press conference, he said, the plan was to come out in the second half and run it down their throat and drive it down their throat. And he said, and we were doing that. And then we had this mishap. Yeah, and I don't understand. I mean, I'm guessing with Kendall here, the way he reacted, I guess he was thinking Stetson pulled it.
It was weird. It was like, it was like he saw the ball hit the ground and keep moving. And I'm assuming
it's like there and
both of them are moving away as it gets dropped. Stetson got the penalty that was nullified by by LSU taking the ball, but I thought it was smart of him, actually. Like, he saved a touchdown probably by diving in front of that.
He did, yeah. Now we get Nussmeier, and
who is a stud, by the way.
Who is a stud?
He wants to hit the portal. I'm interested.
This scramble, I mean, he caused a lot of these like scramble rules where when the quarterback gets out, you have, you can see it with the defenders where DBs have to come up and respect that run, and then you have wide receivers that are just good enough to kind of just keep moving, and so linebackers come up.
And normally in these scramble moments that you're referring to, like whoever you're on in that moment, you're supposed to stick to, and some of Georgia's defensive backs started not sticking to those guys in the moments and assuming that safety help was going to be there, and that was frustrating to watch. This is a good throw by Nussmeier, but tell me your thoughts on this, because
I mean, my thoughts are, so what you're going to see, right? So you're going to see Keeley like he knows he has help over the top with Malachi, and you're going to see him kind of pass him off. And you've got to have your head turned looking for that run. Malachi's coming over. I think if you keep drifting with him, then I don't know. I felt like maybe it was a little bit pressing, where when you're up 35-10 in a game and you're pressing to make that play, I mean, we've all seen Malachi, the athlete that he is, but I know people, are going to give Ringo a hard time, but this is the rule, right? I mean, you got a safety right there over the top. You're turning your head to respect the run. Malachi's in position to make a play. He just jumps,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with anything Ringo. Yeah. I mean, there's a little – I will say that, like, it's a little too casual.
That's what I mean by effort, right?
Passes that off,
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's Starks' play to make, and he didn't make it.
And that's a 35-10 level of effort that I was talking about earlier, where normally you're a little bit tighter in that.
Well, and then the problem though is you punt here because you drop a screen on 3rd and 2. Malachi. This is another play where Ringo plays this the right way. Like, they have him bracketed. Malachi is over the top. Keeley is, filtering the receiver to him as they should. And whoops, So it's like that's not on Ringo, but all of a sudden, this game's about to be an 11-point game.
Well, and what this is showing, though, is like when you have a talented wide receiver like Georgia will see against Ohio State, like you got to be able to run with those guys, and we did not run with him in that moment. And then tight end hurting you. I mean,
this was a huge moment, really. Him being a half yard short put them in 4th and inches, 4th and 1, and I mean this was the football game should have been over, obviously, at 35-7, but it felt all of a sudden like it maybe not be. But 4th and inches, Jalen Carter straight up gets some of I think it's number 50 there. But I mean, the way he just like slaps him off the line. I mean, this is a great view. He's going to blow this right tackle up and get down low. It's a great play.
I mean, look at this. That is a grown-ass man.
Yeah. It's silly.
It's really ridiculous.
And
all right, 35-17.
Yeah. 35-17, and you're about to be in 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8 right here after this play. Rare miss in the run block scheme from Darnell. And all right, so you're 3rd and 6. And I love that. I love seeing Rosemead, like the guy that's always blocking for everyone on screens, get a ball and shoot upfield. I
mean, this is a great concept. This, again, it's just I love seeing the offensive
left
line.
Tackle. Yeah, Broderick come out there and put his shoulder on that defensive back and flatten him.
I mean,
right here.
Boom. It's good football.
It is, yeah. And then this is the big split zone gash from Kendall Milton, and it's it's well read by him. It's also really well blocked with Darnell, obviously, but look at Van Pran. Put that defender, that defensive lineman on skates, basically a few yards.
Yeah, I mean,
after engaging with him and shoot him to that left side and seal the hole. But I mean, like these were plays that Georgia's offensive line wasn't making very much early in the year, and I think Stacey Searles deserves a lot of credit, as we were talking about earlier. But like these guys having played together for a full season, basically at this point, like they've gotten really good at understanding how to go about this process of like they just understand the concepts better, and especially in zone plays, they understand what they're doing and where they're supposed to be and what their assignments are so much more than they did. And even the Oregon game, as well as Georgia played and as much as they won by, like they didn't really run block that well that day.
And then this is going to be another one. Yeah, go for it. This is for me. Yeah, this is again effort, right? I mean, you've got JDJ spying a little bit, and he just lets that tackle get into him, and you just can't in that scheme right there. You can't let, as the linebacker playing that gap, like you can't let the guy get on you. But again, I mean, JDJ played a great game. You know, you have one play there, and there's nobody helping over the top.
Right.
And
then this is another one of those situations where it's like Ringo is in good position and he really doesn't contact that receiver too badly, but because he doesn't turn and because he doesn't even try to play the ball, he gets tagged with the pass interference penalty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the end of the day, those drives, you know, you mentioned it before. It felt very similar to the Florida game in that third quarter, where just stuff was happening on defense that is outside the norm for Georgia. Right.
No, I agree. This was a dime from Stetson, man. That throw right there.
Such a good throw.
This was really the last drive of the game for Georgia's offense. And for all intents and purposes, they shut everything down after this. I don't think they had a pass attempt after this drive. That maybe a screen, but nothing downfield.
The 2-point conversion,
yeah. But I mean, like that's just a perfect throw, and it's a great job by Brock. I mean, like that defender is in good position, and he puts his arm in there, and Stetson knows, like, I just threw a perfect pass.
Yeah, you don't get those very often.
Yeah, and then
there's Dejan again.
Yeah, and just it's just great blocking off the right side. I mean that, they're just not letting LSU's edges come anywhere close to disrupting that play.
Yeah. Hated this call. Again, I mean, it's 2nd and 3 from the 12 or whatever. I just,
Yeah. And now you're 3rd and 5. And dude, they're back in this formation, these tight bunch formations they ran with the 2 tight ends, and it's like, oh, look at that, like a little creativity in the run scheme, little toss sweep.
Yeah.
And I mean, Mims, man, he was great, especially in the run game. But it's like, dude, you got Amarius and Darnell coming out, lead blocking 10 yards downfield.
No, thank you.
Toss sweep. It's a lot to deal with, man.
A lot.
And I think one thing that's worth mentioning is, like, LSU, I think, is, what did we say in our preview? I think they're 7th in the blue chip ratio, or in the 24/7 roster composite. Yeah. I mean, like, this is a really talented roster, and it's as talented of a roster as Georgia has faced this year, truthfully. It's right there with Oregon in terms of sort of, number of 4- and 5-star recruits that they've got.
So I'll address. I tweeted this as well. Folks want to go find it. Georgia went for 2 here. You're up, 48-23, and you're going for 2. Yeah. The chart, the go for 2 chart, says go for 2 if you're up by 25. And so I think Kirby, I think there was messages that he wanted to send, but I also just think, like he said in the post game, it's like the chart says go for 2. But
let's be honest, man.
Yeah.
Well, every coach, even if the chart didn't say anything, is in that situation, they're going to say the chart said to go for 2, not like
100.
I think Brian Kelly's a dick.
Well, I also think Todd Monken, the way he reacted to that 2-point conversion, I think he wanted that 50 burger in a big way.
Well, one thing that not many people realize is Todd Monken's, some of his first coaching jobs were under Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly was the head coach at Grand Valley State. Todd Monken coached wide receivers there. So It makes me wonder maybe what kind of boss a young Brian Kelly was. I mean, there's stories about him at Central Michigan making his grad assistants valet cars at his
for sure. Party. Yeah, that was
so,
Matt LaFleur, right? Like it's very well known. You can look it up where the way he treated folks on his staff were not good.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure if you get an even younger, less wise version of him than what you had at Central Michigan, you probably get even more crap. So, who doesn't want to – everybody has that old boss from at some point back in the day in their lives when they were young that they'd love to stick it to if they got the chance. So, good on you, Todd Monken, for, a 2-point conversion for the American working man.
Yeah. This drive right here I hated. This was the effort drive that I was talking about. Yeah, you're up 50-23 with 7 minutes left in the game, but there were just times where LSU, they were coming back to the ball. They were doing things that, I mean,
they did that to Ringo all day, man.
Yeah.
And we love Keely, right? And we love Keely's mom. I've interviewed her on 100 Sanford. Like, they're a great family. They're great people, and none of this is personal in any way. But he got targeted 12 times on Saturday for a reason. And it's
for sure.
Some of that's premeditated from tape, but some of it's because his guy is open, and it's just simple. This is another one of these scramble rule plays. And I talked about this a lot in 12 takeaways, but when Nussmeier breaks the pocket here, Starks is in the middle of the field. He's on that right hash mark, and he is the single high safety here, or maybe they're in cover. It doesn't look like they're in cover 3 because you see Kamari. He follows his receiver all the way across the field, but he's in some sort of zone. The problem is that when the zone, when Nussmeier breaks the pocket, there is an opportunity that he could potentially run. And if everyone else is supposed to be in man coverage, then that's a scenario where Starks may need to come up, he has the freedom to do that on that play. But B, like we talked about earlier, Keely's man is Keely's man. And, he's not in man coverage all the way from the 33 where LSU snapped it to the pylon and then all of a sudden switching to zone. His assignment on that play is to be with that man. So it was a little bothersome for me when, I saw PFF assign this play to Starks, and I thought that was kind of BS because it's
you can't. What you're saying is exactly right. So right here he's a man, right? So if you look at the top, he's the highest guy, and even with scramble rules, when he comes out, you either commit or you don't. So if you're in man and you're committing to the scramble rules, but Keely doesn't, he just kind of drifts, right? And when you drift, that's where Starks is not he's thinking you still have man because you're going behind him and he's coming up to play these scramble rules. And so I think it is, I think technically that's Keely should come up and play the scramble rules. Starks should go back and cover the middle of the field. But when Keely drifts like that, it's just that's what's going to happen. You're going to cause your safety to think you're still running with this guy. Yeah, he's you're still running with your guy up here. I've got to go make a play. But in reality, you just let him go. So,
yeah, 100%.
But also, what a play by Nussmeier, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, I had fun watching the kid. You know what I mean?
Hit the portal. Come on.
Yeah. There were probably some plays that should have been picks that Georgia didn't make in this game because of that. Just a little more lax effort in the second half. But
and then we just run out the clock.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. So you have 12 takeaways on Dawgs Central. Summarize, maybe a couple of those points that we've been talking about with this game that Georgia can take away from this game heading into Ohio State in Atlanta.
Yeah, well, I mean, I noticed the CBS broadcast a lot in the second half being I bet Ohio State's watching this. bet Alabama's watching this. I bet everybody's watching this. Like, and I mean, Georgia gave up 500 passing yards, so like they will be watching that. But, I mean, it wasn't that long ago when they were playing Tennessee, whose wide receiver group, I think, LSU and Tennessee, I think, are probably the two best wide receiver groups in the SEC this year. And like, we saw them stick on those guys really well for 4 quarters because it was a tight game and they were pissed off, right? So it's like we know the ability is there for them to do that. But I think for Georgia, there is a communication issue or an understanding issue somewhere between Ringo and Starks in terms of who's responsible for what and when and where. And I thought there were times, Georgia plays this kind of match zone coverage a lot that really functions as man. They're doing this pattern matching stuff. And so they were in true zone a lot in the second half, and they didn't look very comfortable in it. You know what I mean? Because I don't think they're used to playing it in game that much. But if I was Georgia and I was going into the college football playoff, I would say, Keeley, this is your man, and this is your man the whole play, and you just stick to him. That's your job, and I think he'd be really good at that job. We've seen him be very good at that job in the past. For me, I thought the edge play that we talked about earlier, just getting that production out of Beal and Chambliss, getting 8 pressures combined out of those two was a good sign. Georgia only blitzed LSU 9 times in this entire game. And that's kind of some of that conservative play calling in the second half that we've talked about, and especially on defense. And so I think Georgia's blitz packages this year have been freaking awesome, man. I mean, like when Mondon is asked to rush the passer, he gets a pressure about a third of the time. Dumas Johnson was asked to rush the pressure twice in this game, and he got 2 pressures. Like, that's a pretty good hit rate, right? So my point being in that is that, like, when it's time for Georgia to get pressure, I think they will. And that, they aren't going to burn all those exotic blitz looks and pressure looks onto tape for Ohio State to study in a game where they're up by 30, nor should they. But, I mean, we talked about the offensive line earlier. That was a big thing for me. And, above all, man, like, I think watching it back a couple times, just really, really impressed with Stetson Bennett's performance. Like, I thought this was maybe his best game he's played at Georgia. There were a lot of throws that, were schemed open for him, but there were plenty that were tight window, and he made some really good throws. And he never put the ball anywhere close to danger the entire game. So and I think maybe that will lead us into this kind of talking about the Heisman finalist moment coming up for him. But what were your kind of, big picture?
I mean, similar to you, I think, it's I think the second half, just being clear that Georgia had allowed 164 yards when it was 35-7, and also what you said about Stetson, I think, is just Stetson Bennett has earned his trip to New York as a Heisman finalist. I don't know if he's going to win it. I don't think he's going to win it. But at the end of the day, I mean, this guy, in every big game over the last 2 years, outside of the SEC Championship versus Alabama, when, to be fair, his defense put him in a track meet and he had to, he started forcing some issues.
Right.
But in every big game, like, he's shown up, right? Michigan, the national championship of the fourth quarter. You've seen, you saw the first half versus Tennessee this year. You saw Oregon this year. You saw, all of these games where the guy's been questioned. The guy's been doubted. I have questioned him at times over the last couple of years. But here's what I think: like Georgia, there has been this misnomer when it comes to development at Georgia that because Georgia recruits talented people, that players come in and they're ready to play, and the players that aren't ready to play, there has been this theme with Georgia fans where it's like, yeah, but they're going to get developed at Georgia. So if you're not quite ready to play, like you have good coaching, you have good, you have guys around you. And everyone has been absolutely okay with that, with the secondary, with linebackers, with the offensive line, with all these players, except for the quarterback. No one has said, hey, can a quarterback actually get better? Right? Like, it's like, yeah, a quarterback can get developed. A quarterback can get better. And for some reason, we don't think about it that way and haven't thought about it that way. And what we've seen, I feel like this year, and what I felt like this game was the culmination of a lot of development of Stetson Bennett over the last couple of years, with the throws that he made, the decisions that he made, the situations that he was in, where he played like he's already a national championship quarterback, but he played like an elite quarterback in this game. And if it wasn't Stetson Bennett, if it was, Caleb Williams or CJ Stroud or whatever, like people would have been talking about this game as a Heisman moment where you throw 274 yards, 4 touchdowns, 24 of 29 or whatever it was. And we're making some of the throws that he was making. And so I think it's just really important that people recognize and finally admit that quarterbacks can get better too. Like Stetson Bennett has been developed at Georgia over the last couple of years, and he hasn't just been played because of a good feel-good story or whatever. Todd Monken and Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo has been part of that as well. Like developing and him getting better has been a story that hasn't been talked about enough. People have talked about, he's the games that he's won, the way that he's played, but the guy has actually gotten pretty good as a quarterback. He's a good quarterback. Like he's not just a good game manager. Like he can throw. Like he can use his legs. Like he is a good quarterback, and I think that development has been a key part of that, and we don't talk about that enough.
I agree with that. I think that you make a great point, and I think there's a couple of things here that are fascinating to me about sort of having him, in this Heisman spotlight now. And the first is that, like, looking at this LSU game, not that Todd Monken needed any like more proof of concept, right? Like we know he's a stud, we know he's really good at what he does, but I've had the like Todd Monken long con theory going back to 2021, where I think he and Kirby really operate this team under the auspices of like, we are only going to show what we need to show to win this game and move on to the next game. And that stands in stark contrast to programs like Alabama, where, we are going to force feed Jamison Williams and John Mechie because we want to tell you that we have two 1,000-yard wide receivers, or Ohio State, where we are going to be willing to run this interesting deep double post concept and put it on tape so that CJ Stroud can get another touchdown pass when we're up 17 with, late in the third quarter against whoever, I don't know, whoever they play, Rutgers or whatever. Georgia has dudes on that roster. Like if Brock Bowers, if they wanted to make Brock Bowers a 1,000-yard receiver, they could make Brock Bowers a 1,000-yard receiver. Absolutely. If they wanted to make Ladd McConkey a 1,000-yard receiver, I think they could have done that as well this year. Like they're, ditto for the running back room. Like we saw Kenny McIntosh go off for almost 400 all-purpose yards passing receiving and rushing in a couple game stretch to end the season. So when you look at Stetson Bennett's stats and you look at Georgia this year, the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that this offensive line wasn't very good in run block to start the season. And because of that, Georgia's run game at times early in the year against Oregon and South Carolina, like, yes, they had some nice runs on the ground at moments and they were efficient at times, but like there's a reason why they had to throw a lot of screens, and that was a big part of the offense. And there was a reason why Stetson was attempting 30, 35 passes in games against Oregon and South Carolina. And it's because they needed to do that to win. And it's because they needed to pass the ball really well, especially in some of these kind of intermediate and deep ranges, to open up the defense for the run. And it's because they knew every single team they were going to play early in the season was going to come out and say, we're going to make that dude beat us. We're not going to let Georgia run the ball on us. And we're going to, we're going to play our safeties tight to the line of scrimmage. We're going to stack the box, and we are going to make it so that Georgia does not beat us on the ground. And we're going to force that dude to beat us. And guess what? He beat them, all of them, all along the way. And
most of them
good doing it.
Yeah, most of them he not only beat, he embarrassed.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I mean, I think, like, again, the development at Georgia cannot be overstated. The job that this staff has done using the pieces that they've assembled and not exactly what you're saying, like not forcing the issue. So Georgia is deep into 13-0 SEC champions, about to make a run for another national championship, took 0 players from the portal after losing 15 players to the NFL draft and 13 players to the transfer portal last year. Took no one because of this coaching staff's ability to know how to develop players, and how to evaluate players, so you got the right players in the door to begin with, develop them, but then also knowing how to use them. And you've done it this year where you have a quarterback who's been developed, who's been missing his probably best wide receiver target at both of the, both A.D. Mitchell and Arian Smith, who are 2 big weapons in this offense. And is doing it with, very talented athletes, Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, an absolute freak, 2, 3, maybe 4 good running backs. But man, you can't overstate just the job that this staff has done. Now, yeah, go for it. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, I mean, like,
yeah,
we've watched a lot of Georgia tape this year. And, there was a lot of games. Go back and watch the Missouri game. Like, a big problem for Georgia in that game, aside from the offensive line, was that their receivers weren't getting open against man coverage. And Stetson was having to make really tough throws. And, there was the viral Jordan Rodgers video before the Tennessee game where he was like, they're not overly gifted in terms of the athletes they have at wide receiver. And of course, the wide receivers go and have a big day and make a bunch of explosive catches. But there was some truth to his point that Stetson was having to do a ton to get guys open. And, he was having to manipulate safeties with his eyes and the way that he would roll out. Like, he was doing a lot to get his guys open. And I say all that to say this, like, there's been this sudden kind of up, the sudden swell over the last few days of people being like, well, the reason Stetson is a Heisman finalist is because he's got all these gifted targets around him. And a month ago, I was being told that Georgia was going to lose to Tennessee because they didn't have enough gifted targets around Stetson Bennett.
Correct.
So A,
correct,
you guys can't have it both ways. B, like, this whole thing with him, I saw somebody try to compare him to A.J. McCarron today. And it's like, Georgia's offense has not been dependent on play action this year. If anything, it's been opposite. They've been dependent on throwing the ball to open up the run game.
Open up the run, yeah.
And then, second of all, it's like, there's no Amari Cooper on this roster for Georgia.
No.
There's not a Eddie Lacy, TJ Yeldon 2,000-yard rusher tandem. There's not a 1,600-yard rusher and Trent Richardson. Like comparing what Georgia has done with Stetson Bennett this year to anything A.J. McCarron did just makes you look dumb because it's not – they're not equivalent. And I think with this whole thing, I mean, there's a reason why I had a Stetson Bennett Heisman finalist futures bet. And it's because, like, Georgia was going to go likely undefeated again this year. And you couldn't have Georgia go 24-0 over the last two regular seasons and not send somebody to New York, right?
Yep.
So I don't know.
Correct.
Do I think he's the best player in college football? I don't think anybody at that ceremony is the best player in college football. I don't think any of them are close.
No.
I think the best player in college football is, plays in the trenches. I think the best player on Georgia's team is Jalen Carter. I have no doubt about that. But those dudes don't get Heismans. And
nope.
I mean, like, was Mark Ingram the best player in college football in 2009 when he won a Heisman? No, absolutely not. Like, Eric Berry, if you were starting a football team, you would have taken Eric Berry 100 times out of 100 to start your football team with before you took Mark Ingram. And it's fine 100%. That he won a Heisman because the Heisman is a team award in many senses. It's a media narrative representation of kind of, the team that was the story for the season. So all this sudden stuff of like, and the thing that's bothered me the most is people being like, Hendon Hooker should be there instead of Stetson Bennett. It's like, dude, I saw those two play on the same field one day a month ago, and I can tell you which one, handled that moment better, and I can also tell you which one can survive in a football game when his first read isn't open, and it ain't Hendon Hooker. All right, rant over. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, yeah. So we don't have to go into any of that. We beat that horse to death. But at the end of the day,
sure.
I think again, Georgia's staff, tons of credit for the job that they've done. Yes, you got to recruit the way that the level they recruit to get the results that you're getting, but also you lost 15 players to the draft, 13 to the portal, didn't take anybody from the portal. You rode with the guys that you brought in and the culture that they have created on this team, and you are about to make a run. Quick, maybe like the next 5 minutes we'll end this thing, but quick thoughts on Ohio State. Do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're a very talented football team at the skill positions. We know that. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba not returning for this game is a huge deal. Because the guys that they will have on Saturday, like I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of the best wide receivers in the country, but he is not a quick cut, super agile wide receiver. And I think that's who you want a guy like Ringo to match up with, right? Like a physical, bigger bodied receiver, and, let those two go battle. So I think that's a big deal for Georgia. I also just kind of first impressions watching that Michigan game a couple of weeks ago, the interior of that offensive line looked pretty soft, and that would be a concern for me if I had to face Jalen Carter. And I think the kind of last but not least, just I think it's going to be a very similar – like I don't think they can run the ball on Georgia with consistency. So I think, the secondary has got to strap in for a game, and they will stay true to the run. Don't get me wrong, like they're not going to abandon the run like LSU did on Saturday, but I think I think just I'll put it this way, like Michigan was able to really confuse their safeties, and I expect them to have that figured out, but I don't think this defense is better than a lot of the defenses Georgia's faced this year. Like, I think that Georgia should have success moving the ball on this Ohio State defense.
Yep. Well, yeah, I think, my initial thoughts are we have seen Georgia find the ability to win games in multiple ways, as we've already talked about this, to start this show. Ohio State, Michigan came out and punched them in the mouth. and opened up explosive plays because Michigan was more physical than Ohio State. And Michigan showed those two facets, right? Physicality and explosiveness at the same time. And I think that's a dangerous recipe for Ohio State. I think Ohio State has a very talented roster. I don't think Ohio State I don't think Ohio State will be in the top 3 most physical teams that Georgia has played this year. And I think Georgia will be at least in the top 2 with Michigan of the most physical teams that Ohio State has played. And so it's going to come down to physicality. And I think Georgia, it's going to be interesting. I think the Jackson Smith and Jigba missing, and that weapon missing, and he hasn't played much this year, so it's not like they've been doing all this with him and now they're going to be without him. But I do think that element is, it's kind of like, it is kind of like the ability to have 3 different styles to attack the Georgia defense. And when you start taking those pieces away, and then you're left with, all right, now we got to be physical because we've got to be able to run the ball to open up some of these other plays with these wide receivers that we have left. I think it's going to be an interesting recipe for Ohio State. So we got plenty of time to talk about it, though, because we have this, big lull between. And so we'll have some shows and we'll be breaking it down. We'll be breaking it down on Dawgs Central. So if you're not there, come on and join us over at dawgcentral.com. And I'm looking forward to the next few weeks of talking about not just Georgia, Ohio State, but we got some pretty good bowl games for a season that was supposedly a down season of college football. You got some pretty intriguing matchups coming up, so it's going to be good. Oh,
yeah. No, it's going to be fun. And we'll be back, obviously, with lots of Ohio State breakdown. We haven't even talked about the transfer portal yet. There's a lot happening there. We've got signing day coming up in less than 3 weeks. We've got a lot to cover, and we'll be here for all of it.
We'll come back. I'll make a promise. We'll come back this week or next, and we'll talk about transfer portal. We'll talk about signing day and recruiting. We'll do a little bit more of a preview of some of the games coming up, and we'll have a good time.
Sounds like a plan, man. Well, John, as always, thanks for joining us. If you guys do not follow John, go check him out at John Tweet Sports on Twitter. And you can also come hang out with both of us on the dawgcentral.com forum. Tons of intel flying right now. I think we've had 8 or 9 intel updates in the last 24 hours with portal and recruiting and, potential kind of stuff with which Bulldogs might be going pro. There's a lot happening right now. It's a fun time in college football. So come check out what we have going on. I promise you will be up to date. And more than anything, we just have a really great community with a lot of good people. And if you want to go somewhere and have mature conversations with adults and not be called a bunch of names for opinions and be able to disagree civilly, dawgcentral.com is your place. Come check us out.
Come on.
Until then, go Dogs.
Yeah. See ya.